Now don't forget a loaf of bread, a container of milk, and a stick of butter. If you can't remember, I'll write it down for you.
That's okay, Mommy. I won't forget. I'll remember. A loaf of bread, a container of milk, and a stick of butter. A loaf of bread, a container of milk, and a stick of butter. A loaf of bread, a container of milk, and a stick of butter. A loaf of bread, a container of milk, and a stick of butter. A loaf of bread, a container of milk, and a stick of butter. A loaf of bread, a container of milk, and a stick of butter. Mister, could I have a loaf of bread, a container of milk, and gee, I can't remember. Can you remember what my mommy said?
A loaf of bread, a container of milk, and a stick of butter.
A stick of butter. I remembered. Mommy, I remember. A loaf of bread, a container of milk, and a stick of butter.
You have a good memory, honey.
Thank you, Mommy.
Alright, so the purpose of that video was used as a set induction, and it was intended to introduce a list of items that are related. Those items belong to a grocery list. So it's an introduction to arrays in Pascal. During this lesson, you will learn why do we need arrays, revise elementary data types, what is an array, and how to assign or store a value into an array. The lesson is designed in a way to offer scaffolding to students, where things are done in chunks and it is ensured that they had the prerequisite in order to move on to arrays. With why do we need arrays? And I brought back the picture of a grocery list and I just put the word milk alone. Suppose I wanted to store one item. And how do I do that in Pascal? I would have to create a place to store that value milk. I would have to declare a variable in Pascal. What should I name that variable? I will call it item. I would have to think about what type of value to store into that variable. I would have to decide on a data type. This list of items here is intended for students to be able to think about what they should think. It is a scaffolding method that I used. So next, a hyperlink is put to another page on data elementary data types to them. So the first column has data types, the second column has a definition of the data type, and the third column would have examples. For example, integers, whole numbers, and 0, -33, 2019. Then real or floating point, numbers that include decimals, and the examples are there. Alright? I try to immediately assess if the students understood data types. And students were provided with a simple page protector and a letter size paper inside of the page protector with a whiteboard marker. This allowed for me to quickly see, without the students feeling shame, what their answers would be to each of these things that I will be asking throughout the video, throughout the lesson. Alright? So, I gave them this table, and with this table, they had to draw over the table on their whiteboard and fill in the data type that they thought that it was. So, when they were done, we checked their answers, integer, string, real, and character. Next, we moved on to declaring a variable. What data type would I need to declare to store the item milk as my value? Var item string. So this slide is intended to show them that when I declare a variable in Pascal, I want them to picture in their minds, this is another scaffolding method, that a box is created immediately with nothing in it. And the variable name item is there for that box. So the box is a memory location, and item is the name of that memory location. So the memory location is just a sign only, not storing a value into a variable. How do I store the value milk into the variable item? Well, I showed them what I meant, item with milk in it, and then I showed them this answer. So I wanted them to associate this happening to what is happening on the right side. So I gave them another formative assessment. When you have students who don't quite understand a topic well, you always try to check at nearly every step if they understood, so that we all could move on. So the question is to declare or create variables. And I gave them 2 sets of questions to complete. This one is straightforward. I have a variable called num to store integers, but this one they had to think a little bit. A variable called initial to store the first letter of your name. It was a little higher order thinking skill, in that it wasn't it wasn't given to them like in question 1 here, where you see num and you see integers. But you had to think to store the first letter of your name. What does that mean? Well, to store a letter alone, and they had to associate that to one of the data types that they were shown. So then after they tried, I showed them this answer, and then I showed them the other answer. Question: assign or store values into variables that were previously declared. So I gave them these 2 to do. They had to store -23 into num, and they had to assign the first letter of their name to the variable initial. And I gave them a chance to do it, and I looked around to see what they did. And then so now I'm going to introduce to them the array, the list of items. What if I wanted to store a list of items? I can then create 5 different variables. So this thought here, this slide bridged from having single variables like this, right? And showing them how to declare the single variables. It bridged single variables to arrays, and it was absolutely necessary. So I then told them, suppose you wanted to store 100 items instead of just 5, it would be difficult to create 100 different variables, right? This is where an array comes in. What is an array? An array is a variable that can store a number of elements, but the elements must be of the same data type. So instead of making separate variables to store these 5 items, like that, I could make a one array, right? So we can create an array and we can call it item. This array will have 5 storage locations, or we can have 5 elements. So I made sure and show them the index on the left side, introduce that to them. So let's take a closer look at this array. So I showed them the array in a different format, but I still, I made sure and highlight to them that it's index still an item, and the 5 locations are still there, and the 5 items are still stored. Then I moved on to making it look like this, progressing, right? The look. I wanted them to understand that the array it doesn't look the same way all the time, but it kind of does have some similarity, right? They're seeing the 1 to 5 in this first picture, they're seeing the 1 to 5 here, they're seeing the 1 to 5 here, right? So then I moved on to how do we declare a one-dimensional array? And I showed them the syntax, and at that point I reminded them that syntax means the rules of the programming language, and they would see that it is var array name, the name of the array is put here, colon, and then the word array is put with square brackets and x dot dot y square brackets of data type, semicolon. Then I showed them an example related to the question that I had before. Var item colon array 1 to 5 with 2 dots inside in square brackets of the data type string. And I showed them it will make this box here. So the size of the array determines the amount of elements it can hold. The data type determines the type of values that the array can store. And in an array, I can only have elements of the same data type. Those were 3 important points for students to get. Assigning or storing values into an array. I have the array name. This is the syntax for it, the array name, with square brackets, the index, colon equal to the value. And this is the box here. And this is the example. I give them 3 examples from this example here of how to assign values to different locations in an array. So I moved on to making sure I could test to see if they understand all that I spoke about just now. And so I gave them something to try. And they saw this array here, and I said, what is the index location of the letter X? And they were using their individual whiteboards to answer. It was important for me not to have them working in a group because I wanted to check each of their thinking. So letter X is in location 6. What is stored in location 1? S. What is the name of the array? Word. Declare the array seen above, right? And I checked to see if they were able to do all of this. And I was also checking to see if they would remember that they should put a semicolon at the end here. So next, I went on to recap what we just learned about arrays, declaring the one-dimensional array, and assigning or storing values into an array. I left this on the board in order for them to complete the activity sheet that you will see is attached lower down on this web page. And then I went around and I checked their answers, and that was the end of the lesson on arrays. The next lesson is supposed to help them to learn how to initialize an array and how to use an array effectively within a program.